Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Just give me a little shout to let me know that you're reading me loud and clear. So over the last 10 years, and because of my passion for sort of smaller South African communities, I've had the privilege of traveling to 155 different projects around South Africa. Since 2012, and with the Expedition Project, I've also visited game reserves, both private and national, from the Kalahari to the Karoo, from Manyoni to Mapungubwe. And I've seen these through my eyes as a South African, and also through the eyes of the international volunteers that have joined these trips. I first visited Amakhala Game Reserve and their connected Amakhala Foundation in 2012. And what struck me immediately was that they worked just as hard on their community projects as they did on the conservation projects. And it really made me realize that no conservation work is possible without the community. There's no conservation without community buy-in, and there's no conservation without education. Tammy from the Amakhala Foundation spoke previously about their environmental education projects that they're doing in the foundation. And as part of this series of live streams with Amakhala, tonight we bring you part 4, which is the Amakhala Foundation's community projects, and more specifically, their literacy project. So with that, I'm going to bring in Kathy from the Amakhala Foundation. Hi there, Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Hi there.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you, Roger.
How's life in the Eastern Cape?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, given, the current circumstances with COVID and no tourists, but other than that, we've had beautiful autumn weather. So all in all, in that sense, pretty good.
Nice. So a reminder to those of you who are watching this live, you can post your questions in the comments and we'll aim to answer them. But only if you're in the Facebook group. So please, if you're not a member yet, join the Facebook group so we can actually post your questions and answer them live. If you're watching this on replay, you can still post your questions in the comments, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So to start off with, Kathy, what sort of brought you to Amakhala, and what's your background?
Okay. Well, I'm part of the family that is a co-owner on Amakhala Game Reserve, the Gush family. And my own background has always been in NGO work. I've worked for education NGOs for probably more years than I care. So over 30 years, first in Cape Town when we were based there, when we were first married, and then we moved to the Eastern Cape to our farm here in about 1998. And I've always been involved in education projects. I've been doing a lot of work in the nearby town called Grahamstown, where there's also a university and where I work for an NGO. But I gradually got drawn into the work of the Amakhala Foundation because I'm passionate about children's literacy. And I was looking around and saying, well, there are a lot of children in this area. There's a school, they're young children. And I just felt led to also be investing in their literacy development and their educational progress. So for the last 2 years or so, I've been doing work for the Amakhala Foundation, specifically on educational and literacy projects.
Okay, amazing. So would you like to tell me a little bit more about these sort of literacy projects and what that entails?
Yeah, and we've got a couple of things going. The main thing is what I call a literacy library and literacy hour every Monday morning. Of course, not at the moment with COVID and lockdown and no school happening, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. So every Monday morning, I spend about 2 hours at the little local school where there are about 45 pupils. And we've got a tiny little library there, and I will take a group of them at a time, one grade at a time, into the library. And in fact, I take half the grade, half the children from a particular class, and we'll do story time. I'll read them 2 or 3 stories, depending on how much they demand and how much time we've got. And then they will get an opportunity themselves to choose a book that they can then take home with them and borrow for the week, as it were, and then bring back the next week and exchange, or in a fortnight's time, whatever the time period might be. And we've had special book bags made for them that they can store their books in so that they can take them home safely and bring them back safely again, and they get protected. So they get an opportunity, the children, to choose something that they would like to read just for enjoyment, for the fun of it. It's got nothing to do with it practicing their reading, or they don't have to report back on it, or it's not considered schoolwork. it's really to just kind of show them that reading can take you places, can be exciting, can be fun. And usually they'd have to get a sibling or a parent at home to read it to them. So that's our kind of library hour. But while that's going on, the other half of the class is having a one-on-one session with Amakhala volunteers, who I think Pietro would have spoken about the Amakhala volunteer program as well. And they come in, so they take the other half of the class while I take the one half, and they do some one-on-one activities with the children, which is really very valuable because they play literacy games with them that work on letter sound knowledge, on building vocabulary, and they're fun games. And they make the whole sort of literacy thing fun. There's a set of animal cards, for instance, with which they can play Snap and things like that. But they're also building vocabulary, in the meantime. So that's our kind of library and literacy hour. And we also have special events that we mark or commemorate, like World Read Aloud Day, which in South Africa is driven by an organization called Nalibali. They bring out a special story for the occasion that you can download. And we will then get game rangers and the volunteers and anyone in the community will come along on the day, and they will one-on-one read the story to a child and draw a picture together about it. And it all goes into a kind of massive big campaign where Nalibali then say at the end of the day, their numbers have been increasing every year. I think this year they had something like 2 million at the same time on World Read Aloud Day. So we'll do special events like that. But the whole year actually culminates in the reading camp at the end of the year, where the grade 2s and 3s come, and they spend 2 days on the reserve camping out, obviously in a safe space. And they do a kind of combination of environmental and literacy activities. And then we've got a guy that leads it for us, a guy called Basil Mills, possibly see him in one of the photos a little later, who is a legend in the area. And he does all kinds of wild and wonderful things with them: story time, reading time, finding objects in the area that they then talk about and write about. We usually have a visiting author as well that comes in. So it's a kind of a day and a half jam-packed with literacy and learning activities, all of it fun. And one of the main things we're trying to do is build a culture of reading, and also just to associate reading with fun and enjoyment, to kind of go beyond the classroom experience where they get very caught up in the kind of technical process of learning to decoding and encoding and the sort of whole phonemic process, and very little whole language experience happens. So we're trying to give them that whole language experience of stories and books, as where it all comes together and where the really fun part is. We're trying to give them those experiences, and especially also because a lot of the children don't come from backgrounds, homes where people are able to have a lot of reading material in the home, or there isn't necessarily a strong tradition of having books there that can be read together as a family. So we're also really trying to promote that.
Amazing. So, the reading camp sounds incredible. Is this a photo of
it them? Is. That's Basil Mills, one of a kind. And here he is. He takes them on a walk, and they have to pick up different objects, taste them, feel them, talk about them, and kind of gather them together, so that they can weave a story around that, when they get back to base, as it were. And it's really important to be giving children these kind of stimuli for writing, because writing is something that they often struggle with. It's kind of the last step, in the literacy process. And if you can kind of stimulate their imagination and their thinking and give them objects that they can think about and talk about and then write about, it helps a lot.
So Tanya says the reading camps sound amazing, and she's wondering if this is actually all done in English, or there are other languages as well.
So most of it is done in English, but Basil does speak a little bit of isiXhosa, and we usually have an isiXhosa helper or two as well to translate where necessary. The children are schooling in English because the little local primary school is an English medium school, but their home language is isiXhosa. And we absolutely encourage them to read, talk, ask questions, etc., as much as they want to, in their home language, because we value that. We by no means want to negate their home language, but they are also reasonably comfortable in English because they're learning in English.
Okay, amazing. Let's have a look at some other photos. So is this them leaving to actually go on this camp?
They get fetched in this vehicle, yes, and then they also go on a game drive on the reserve during the camp. Once again, to kind of gather info and things that they can write about, but also to give them the exposure, to the reserve and to animals. And they usually we have a theme animal for the camp. So the first year, I think it was the giraffe, and this year it was the zebra. And then they will kind of focus on that animal as well and see if they can see them in their natural environment.
What are some of the feelings that are sort of coming through as some of these children are presumably seeing a lot of these animals and going on a game drive for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very special for them because they know that they live in an area, where there are game reserves and these animals are about, but they wouldn't actually necessarily get to see them. So it really connects them with the animals, seeing them in their natural environment. I think that feeling of connectedness, of connecting with the animals in their environment is very special for them because, as I say, they know that they're kind of surrounded by the reserves, but they wouldn't necessarily see them on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so how about this? Is this right at the end of the camp?
No, they actually, well, that was taken at the end, but what they do is in the course of the camp, they paint their own big banner, and it's called the ABC camp. So it's the Amakhala Books and Conservation camp, and Basil helps them to make this big poster. He is, amongst other things, also a brilliant artist and cartoonist. So he'll draw the outlines, and they will then all be involved in painting it. I think maybe there's a picture somewhere as well of them getting involved in painting it, and that's what they then come up with. That's their banner for the camp. And on the right, you'll see Mlumzi, who is our one of our isiXhosa assistants, dressed in quite traditional garb. Yeah, he's one of our helpers as well.
So Tanya also wants to know if people are donating books for the library.
We haven't gone on a big book donating drive for the library as such, because actually we're fortunate enough to have a little, it's like a regional depot almost. So all the books in the library are mostly from the regional library services, which is a provincial stroke government service. So we're actually fine for the library, but we have had some funds donated in the past to be able to give the children books to take home. So you can see here they're holding up a book, and it's a wonderful book called Mr. Hare Meets Mr. Mandela, and it features Nelson Mandela and a hare, and it's the most wonderful story. And it's not particularly cheap, so we did get some funding for this particular camp to be able to give the children each their own copy of this book.
Oh, amazing. Okay, let me go through some more of these fantastic photos. And let's have a look. Okay, so is this them then designing their paintings?
Yes. So, well, this is where he's done the outlines for them, and they're filling it in with paint. So it's a kind of group activity. And